Welcome, I'm Ronnie from Ronny's Garage in Southern California. Today we're holding our monthly tech meet at Ronny's Garage. We're going to be talking about Silver Cloud brakes. They come from the factory 11.25 inches in diameter. So what makes the drums go bad is when they get machined every time the brakes are done, they get bigger, bigger, and bigger. The maximum you can machine them is 50 thousandths of an inch. So that's 1/20th of an inch, basically, right? So this little tool right here is a drum gauge. It has a dial indicator for all of those looking out there. I got to get the camera stuff. For some reason, the internet thinks they're more important than people in person. So this will read, it's set to 11.25 inch. So if you look at it, if you look at this now, everybody can get up here and take a look at this. I walk it back and forth, and you try to find the place where it moves the most, and that's 10 thousandths oversized. So as ugly as this brake drum looks, all the rest are the same. I already measured them. They're totally usable. Totally usable. And if they were really badly scored, you see corrosion on there and all that, and on a normal American or a standard car where your brake cylinder is directly connected to the pedal, any variation in thickness within reason or roughness, you'll feel in the pedal. It's like when you go metal to metal, you hit the brakes, you feel like grinding. Not only do you hear it, but you feel it. And then on drums, one thing is really, it happens on rotors also, or discs, is when they get uneven thicknesses, your pedal does this. So that means either the drum is out of round, it's been machined, or it's been overheated and warped, or your thickness of your discs / rotors is variable. So most disc brakes nowadays you just throw away. You don't even try to machine them because they start out pretty thin. The brake compounds they use now have a lot of metal in them, so they just wear them out as they go anyways, and you just throw new discs on. Drums you can do the same with. I don't like to because the original drums are better than the new ones, I think. But so this does not need drums. I'm just going to clean them up, scuff them up with a Scotch-Brite so they look cleaner. And that's the drums. So on the front brakes, it's funny how the right side is what leaked on this car. There's another set of wet brakes. Yeah, I like that. All in unison.
Really?
So the wheel cylinders, everything, it's been restored somewhat. So they probably, what they did, which I've done many times, is they take a hone, which is it's a device you hook into a drill motor that has expandable cutting stones on it, right, or balls, and you run it in there and you hone it to clean it up. I sold them new wheel cylinders on this. For years you could not get them for a reasonable price, but now you can. There's aftermarket companies making them now. There's a few, or a couple. And also, for years, we had to sleeve them. So when they got pitted and rusted so far that your honing would not allow the rubber boots to seal, I could take them off, send them to a guy who specialized out in Pomona area, and he would bore it oversized and press the sleeve in there and then bore it and hone it to the right dimension again. I've had a lot of problem with the sleeved wheel cylinders because for some reason they will leak around the sleeve and still leak. So this is a car that you don't want to shortcut on, in my opinion, in any way. So we're getting new shoes, new wheel cylinders, and then there's another problem, okay? This is very common on the Silver Clouds because you can have nice dry brakes out there and still not be able to stop when you want to. And here is the culprit on this one. This transmission is leaking, obviously. This is your brake servo right here. This is what applies the master cylinders, okay? That right there. When you apply the brakes, it's a dry clutch, and it's hooked to the transmission. So when the car is moving, one part of this thing is always moving with the car, and you apply that clutch, and what it does is it pushes these master cylinders. These are the hydraulic part. These are nice and dry. more than likely have been replaced. So the servo is wet, and the way they get wet, and we're going to see that once I get this off, is the shaft that comes out through the servo has a seal on it that holds the transmission fluid in the transmission. And just like the brake linings, when the oil gets out of the transmission onto that dry clutch, it's lubricated, and it does not do its job.
Yeah.
So a common symptom on a Silver Cloud that your servo needs doing is when you're driving a car, and sometimes they'll work okay, especially at low speeds. But as you're coming to a slow stop at like a red light, right at the very end they shudder, so you get this. It's a weird feeling, and it makes you wonder. But I've heard it so many times. Every time I get one of those off, it's not wet to the point that you're going to see that this one is wet when we get it apart, but it'll be all greasy. And it's a dry clutch, so it has to be dry for it to grab that steel plate that's moving in there.
So presumably this isn't driven that much.
Mm-hmm.
This is just happening because age, wear, wasn't done right.
The wheel cylinders will leak, with age, because remember that brake fluid, the standard brake fluid, is hygroscopic. So it attracts water. It's meant to assimilate water, so it's blended in with it. And the reason you want to assimilate that water is so it's not in there free-floating water bubbles that when they get hot expand into steam, and it gives you no brakes. That'll give you a brake fade then. So just by time a lot of times, or by perhaps when this was originally first restored, because the shoes look new. I mean, the brake work's been done. They honed it and didn't notice there were some pits in there, and it just sat. But the worst thing to do with these, the brake cylinders, the wheel cylinders on these cars either have one of two problems. They seize from corrosion and not being used, or they start to leak.
Okay.
So when they seize, everything will look good, but you still won't stop very well because it's not pushing the brake shoes out. I've had to, there's an old trick you can do. When you get one that doesn't, typically when I'm just going to hone cylinders, I will pull the boots out, the shoes off and all that, and I tap on the cylinder and that piston will gradually come out. Some are really frozen. And the one way it's guaranteed to get them out every time is you pull the brake line off and screw in a grease gun and pump the grease and hydraulic it out. But then you got to clean all the grease out. Right? Grease and brake fluid do not mix. They're not happy with each other. I'm going to pull this servo off now. I might need an assistant to hold the light so the camera can see it. So here's the servo. I'm going to need another tool.
Ronny, this is a 2. Is there a difference on the servo between an S1 and an S2?
The servos are the same. Well, the early servos, they had a little different spring plate in there, but taking them off is a little different because of the transmission and the location of that. I'm going to disconnect this. First thing I always do is disconnect this main rod going back to the mechanical rear brakes. That's a long cotter pin, huh?
It's a Mercedes pin.
That sounds racist. I still cannot get over the fact that the two premier British car companies are owned by German companies now.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Aston Martin's owned by an Indian company, right? Tata?
Yeah.
Okay, that one's disconnected.
And Jaguar.
And Jaguar, that's right. So this, we've got these brake rods going to the master cylinder. The next thing I'm going to do is take these off.
Now, as far as the cylinders leaking, there's no issue with fluid incompatibility on the materials used for the seals? Like, I know girdling on British cars, there's some Triumphs, MGs.
On the seals, on the transmission?
On the wheel cylinders or?
The wheel cylinders, yeah, they've got to be compatible to regular, I don't even know what the chemical compound is, brake fluid, which usually on the shadows and all that, when you buy O-rings and seals and all that, they're made from EPDM, which I really don't know what that stands for. But most mineral oil cars, or in fact all, like engine oil, transmission oil, gear oil, the green slime mineral oil for your brakes on the later cars, that's all Buna rubber. And then one other rubber I use, O-rings and all that, for fuel is Viton. That'll handle that.